This past year, our world may seem like it's going downhill with depressing news every day, global pandemics, ecological disasters, and human rights abuses. This does not give us a pass. As global citizens, we have a responsibility to educate ourselves on what's happening, and honestly, it's the least we can do, especially when these issues have a way of playing into our daily lives. So, lipsticks, chocolate, biodiesel galore, items that we can't live without, yet one of the key ingredients is responsible for destroying habitats and exploiting workers. Today, we, social entrepreneurs that work mainly alongside the UN Environmental Assembly, will discuss Indonesia's palm oil industry and propose new regulations that take into account the significance of the industry while prioritizing environmental justice and local communities. Palm oil is unavoidable, so how can we make it sustainable? Mackenzie will tell you all.
Although governments and activists alike have recognized the harmful impact of the palm oil industry, there's a huge disconnect between charities in the West, local activists, small farms, large corporations, and the government. There are too many voices and not enough action. Our ultimate goal is to implement a strong and successful integration between the nonprofit organizations and the people on the ground. Our organizational efforts will go entirely into facilitating a discussion between each of these branches so we know exactly what each group wants and we can be best equipped to offer a robust solution.
We also don't want to add another voice to the already exhausted list, so instead of creating a new nonprofit organization, we believe that partnering with an existing one is the best choice. By using their already existing network, we will increase the strength of the discussions between the nonprofit communities and our communities, and then turn this conversation into meaningful action. We will leverage our positions alongside the UN working at the Palm Oil Action Network, and we will definitely use our contacts with the UN Environment Assembly to push for this change. Coupled with the local staff's familiarity with their social and political situations in the area, we can incite this change. And one specific organization that we have already begun discussing with is the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil Forum. In 2014, the Ministry of Agriculture of Indonesia launched this forum to coordinate all sectors focus on sustainable palm oil. So members include government, private sector, professional associations, NGOs, and academics. Their goal is to create a forum for collective agreement. Yet they're expecting to have a balanced decision-making between these money-hungry companies and activist groups, and that's definitely difficult. And we know this is unrealistic, so our aim is to, 1, prioritize at-risk groups, and 2, prove the benefits of prioritizing these at-risk groups to other stakeholders. As a result, we can build on the Palm Oil Forum's conversation initiatives and speed up the implementation of the National Action Plan for Sustainable Palm Oil by 2025.
Okay, so we have focused on 2 categories to understand where to allocate our resources, people and places. Our solutions are specifically targeted to the biggest at-risk groups. Through mutual support, we can broaden the program to other groups and areas over time. For the first category, we sought to answer who is most at risk. Based on our findings, the group which has faced the biggest threat recently is the Ibans, indigenous to the area. Their group, alongside many of Indonesia's indigenous communities, have lost their ancestral homes, their food and materials used for revenue. They've experienced increased pollution from forest burnings, and they've had to enter trafficking jobs to supplement the lost income because of the palm oil plantations. They've been left out of the process for too long, so we want to center our solutions around the community itself. We will be connecting with the Iban Indigenous group and allowing them to share their experiences and concerns about the corporations. We will leverage the corporation's status as a member of the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil Forum to hold them accountable for their human rights abuses. The goal of these conversations does not have to be a peace treaty, but a negotiation. Essentially, the Iban Indigenous people have agreed to provide us with boundaries for the new plantation locations that avoid cultural and biodiverse areas. As long as the companies adhere to these boundaries, our UN Assembly will brand them as certified SDG 15, Life on Land. This can be great PR for the palm oil industry, as it is being increasingly boycotted today. These unique certifications will replace the current government sustainability certifications, thus giving the company an edge over their competitors. For example, sustainability is trendy. Consumers want to purchase sustainable goods. So products that are marketed as sustainable, according to some statistics we found, grew 5.6 times faster than those that are not marketed as sustainable. A failure to adhere to Indigenous groups' boundaries will not only bring the Human Rights Watch, but halt any further funding from other governments and private entities in the Indonesian Palm Oil Forum.
While our first solution focused more for at-risk populations, our second solution will focus more at-risk areas, ones that have faced mass deforestation, methane pollution, loss of biodiversity, and economic cleanup costs. Building on our IBAN indigenous groups located in Kalimantan, we have also found that East Kalimantan is the most at-risk area, considering the government's plans to relocate the capital and eradicate their lush environments to open up space for construction. Although the central government may make promises to implement a forest city, many loopholes in the law make it so corruption is easier than certification for these sustainable practices. Our solution is an ambitious one: co-op programs, where we would entice local small farms to join a coalition that runs like a larger business, funded and regulated by the government. Currently, small-scale farms comprise of 41% of Indonesia's palm oil acreage, but they have no power in the refineries, which are only controlled by 5 entities. By joining our co-ops, these small farms will gain bargaining power over larger entities that garner the majority of profits, thus serving as a great motivator to join. The coalition of small farmers can provide new knowledge and insights among producers, making each hectare of the plantation as productive as possible. An additional method to boost productivity is investing in newer technologies. By improving machinery, we also maximize the output for every hectare of land and reduce the need for further deforestation. Indonesia can move from a heavily agricultural economy to a secondary sector, increasing their global competitiveness and showing that they are committed to sustainability and newer technologies. Finally, just as East Kalimantan hosts the highest unemployment rate and lowest labor force participation, these co-op programs would increase jobs significantly, not only working on the refineries, but also building the necessary machinery for them. Overall, these co-ops seem like a great way for the economy to get a little boost. But also the biggest shortcoming of the co-op, as you likely would have guessed, is funding. So a main source of income could be the pledges made by public and private sectors to jumpstart the program. For instance, at the UN Climate Summit, 150 companies, including McDonald's and Nestle, which already work with a lot of these palm oil companies, voted to or pledged to eliminate deforestation by 2030. Since they rely heavily on this industry, the money they would have spent on diversifying their ingredients could be spent on investing in newer and better technologies in these co-op programs, allowing companies to continue making a profit while serving local communities. As their investments lead to better technologies, then the palm oil sector itself will become economically feasible. And if that's still not enough to convince the Indonesian government to invest in their own economy, perhaps these co-ops could contain shareholders. Any member of the Indonesian Palm Oil Forum that is committed to sustainable palm oil practices will now serve as a stakeholder, thus having a financial motive to better these practices.
Okay, so our ultimate goal is to connect with the people. It's impossible to do a good job as a nonprofit without having meaningful discussions with the communities who are most affected by the palm oil industry. We must work with one community at a time and leave them prepared to work on their own afterwards. Each community has a different set of traditions, norms, and practices. These specificities must be addressed for the communication and later action to be successfully implemented. In order to ensure sustainability, our nonprofit organization has to implement certain measures. First, the funding must be carefully managed in order to sustain the project over time. Next, the local staff should be accustomed to the cultural and political environment and be prepared for a rapidly changing environment. Without a local perspective, it would be much more difficult to create connections with the local community. By addressing these factors, one community at a time, we can benefit the lives of Indonesians each and every day. Thank you so much.
We would love if you have any questions for us to answer as the group, as our positions, anything you would really like.
Thank you, Team Quaker Dogs. We will now have 5 minutes for a Q&A with the judges.
Hi, Jamie here. Maybe I'll jump in. I have a question about, actually I have many questions, but in the interest of time, I want to get in on the cost piece of this. You talked about the income pledges from public and private sectors. You also talked about that sort of certification, that good brand stamp of approval. I was curious if the certification process itself would incur a fee to the companies, or how is that how the money would be leveraged from the pledge? I'm a little unclear on the funding flows there.
So especially with certification, We will definitely have costs. Currently, the certifications do have costs. The problem is these costs are much higher than the actual costs for corrupt practices. And so that is our goal. It is definitely to decrease the cost, but also increase the almost criteria necessary to acquire these certifications. And so by making a more rigorous criteria, we can at least have people who are truly committed. And thus, because of the rarity of these certifications, now when they will be featured on supermarkets, for example, we did have a vision of having these little stickers saying stamped by the co-op of this community, the Kalimantan community. So as soon as a consumer sees that sticker, they will know that is a very special sort of certification. And slowly the Indonesian government will phase out their previous certifications that actually permitted a lot of the corruption. But excuse me, so sorry to go back on your initial point. The funding, since these certifications will be tied closely to the co-op programs, we are hoping that some of the co-op funding will go into the certifications as well. And so that would almost be like a end all together.
Hi there, this is Meredith. I was curious, to what extent is the work with the co-ops linked to the work with the IBAN communities? Like, is it tied together in some way? How do they interplay?
Mackenzie, would you? I can also take this. Oh, yes.
You got this.
Yeah. Okay. So the best thing, honestly, not the best thing, but definitely a great thing is that they are located in the same area. So that was very helpful for us because they are both located in East Kalimantan. In that way, it becomes easier to at least address the boundaries set by the indigenous groups. And because of the coalition, no longer will there be scattered farms, scattered plantations that continue to promote deforestation every 25 years. It would be more of one big coalition area outside of the boundary set by the IBAN indigenous group. And then that large plantation, although yes, of course, the initial deforestation will be harmful, we're hoping that the costs recovered through the more productive machinery will at least help to mitigate some of those environmental costs. This is only because we understand that palm oil is an essential industry and it can't just be abolished, but rather introduced with sustainable action. We're hoping that with that one big area outside of the IBAN's desired boundaries, we can at least respect both groups, the corporations and the locals.
Great job, guys. This was fantastic to hear. I had a quick question. Have you thought a little bit more about how exactly your business plan, income versus, what goes in and what goes out, how your fundraising, for example, is going to happen, how you're going to engage the various stakeholders, the business community, the government, and all that to make this happen? What will the fuel to kind of make this happen be?
I can take this one. So, first in our strategy is we want to advocate for the people themselves. So by connecting with these communities, first we're going to hear what the biggest problems are for them, and so we can tailor our solution specifically. And through that, we're thinking about, writing articles, creating a little bit of media coverage surrounding it, because to be honest, I knew of the palm oil industry, but I didn't realize there were such terrible inequalities before I actually joined this case competition. And I think a lot of people around the world would like to hear about them. And so we're hoping that through this, by creating some momentum and sharing the stories of these individuals, that can help push, for one, the government to step in and advocate for its own people, and then also by partnering with United Nations and other nonprofits, we can work together to solve this terrible problem.
Another thing, Mackenzie,
that's all the time that we have for questions. And thank you very much, Team Quaker Dogs.
No.
Nice work, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
And we'll now give 5 minutes for the